Every child learns their first language without a single grammar lesson. They don't memorize verb conjugations or study vocabulary lists. Yet by age 5, they speak fluently. Something profound happens in those early years that most language courses completely miss. When people sit down to learn a new language as adults, they typically reach for a textbook. They start memorizing words. They study conjugation tables. They practice grammar drills. And after months or even years of this, they still can't hold a basic conversation. Why? Because they're trying to build a house by memorizing the names of all the tools instead of actually building. The brain doesn't learn languages the way textbooks teach them. Understanding this difference changes everything. Consider what happens when someone opens a language textbook. The first chapter usually presents a list of common phrases. Hello, goodbye, my name is, where is the bathroom? The student dutifully writes these down, repeats them, tries to commit them to memory. Then they move to chapter 2, which introduces new phrases and perhaps some basic grammar rules. The pattern continues. Memorize, drill, test, move forward. This approach treats language like a collection of facts to be stored. But language isn't a collection of anything. It's a living system, a way of thinking, a method the brain uses to represent reality. You can't memorize your way into a system any more than you can memorize your way into understanding how a car engine works just by learning the names of all its parts. The fundamental mistake people make is confusing knowledge about a language with the ability to use it. These are completely different things. You can know every grammar rule in Spanish and still freeze when someone asks you a simple question in a cafe. Knowledge sits in one part of the brain. Ability lives somewhere else entirely. So how does the brain actually acquire language? Look again at that 5-year-old child. They don't know what a verb is. They couldn't explain subject-verb agreement. Yet they use language correctly, naturally, without thinking. How? The child does something that seems almost too simple to be powerful. They play with the language. They hear sounds, they try to make those sounds, they notice what happens. They don't ask, what's the rule? They ask, what happens if I say it this way? They experiment, they fail, they adjust, they try again. And gradually, through thousands of these little experiments, the brain builds an intuition for how the language works. This is the key that unlocks everything. Intuition, not memorization. Here's the method. And it works because it aligns with how the brain naturally processes language. Take any piece of writing in the language you're learning. It doesn't matter if it's a children's book, a newspaper article, or a technical manual. Choose something you're genuinely curious about. This matters more than you might think. The brain pays attention to what interests it and largely ignores what doesn't. Now, don't do what most people do. Don't look up every word you don't know. Don't study the grammar. Instead, do this. Read it and try to guess what it means. Not a wild guess, but an informed guess, based on whatever you can figure out. Maybe you recognize a few words. Maybe the context gives you clues. Maybe you can see patterns in how words connect to each other. Use all of it. Then, and this is crucial, check if you were right. Find a translation or ask someone who knows the language. But here's where it gets interesting. You're not checking to memorize the correct answer. You're checking to see if your mental model works. When you guess wrong, your brain notices the gap between what you expected and what's actually true. That gap is pure gold. That's where learning happens. The brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly trying to anticipate what comes next, what things mean, how patterns work. When your prediction is wrong, the brain updates its model. It adjusts. It learns. But this only happens if you make predictions first. If you just look up the answer without guessing, the brain has nothing to update. The information slides in and slides right back out. This is why memorizing vocabulary lists feels so futile. You're feeding the brain answers to questions it never asked. There's no prediction, no gap, no learning mechanism engaged. The words sit in short-term memory for a while, then evaporate. But when you struggle to figure out what a sentence means, when you wrestle with it, when you form a hypothesis and then test it, you're engaging the same mechanism that 5-year-old uses. You're building intuition. Let's go deeper into what this means. Every language has its own internal logic, its own way of carving up reality. In English, we say, I am cold. In Spanish, they say tengo frío, which literally translates to I have coldness. That's not just a different way of saying the same thing. It's a different way of thinking about the experience of being cold. You own the coldness rather than being it. When you memorize that tengo frío means I am cold, you learn a translation, but you don't learn the logic. You don't develop an intuition for how Spanish thinks about states of being versus possession. The translation is a bridge, but it's a bridge you're supposed to cross and then leave behind. Here's what happens when you use the prediction method instead. You encounter tengo frío in a sentence. You know, tengo has something to do with having. You've seen frío before, maybe connected to ice or winter. You think, I have cold? Maybe it means I feel cold? You check. You're right. Your brain notices, Spanish uses possession for internal states that English treats as being. The next time you encounter this pattern, maybe with tengo hambre for I am hungry, you don't need to look it up. Your brain predicts. If cold is having, hunger probably works the same way. You check. Correct again. The pattern strengthens. You're not memorizing translations anymore. You're developing a feel for how the language thinks. This is the difference between learning vocabulary and learning language. Vocabulary is a list. Language is a system. Systems can't be memorized. They have to be felt, discovered, intuited. But there's another layer to this that makes it even more powerful. After you've read something and checked your understanding, do this. Explain it to yourself out loud in the target language as if you're teaching it to someone else. Don't just repeat what you read. Rephrase it. Use your own words, even if they're clumsy. Try to express the same idea in a different way. Why does this work? Because explaining something forces you to truly understand it. When you just read or listen, your brain can be lazy. It can nod along, creating the illusion of understanding without really processing deeply. But when you have to explain something, you can't fake it. The gaps in your understanding become immediately obvious. Plus, speaking activates different neural pathways than reading. You're not just recognizing patterns anymore. You're producing them. The brain has to actively construct sentences, choose words, apply patterns. This builds the actual machinery of language use, not just the ability to recognize it. Think about what happens in that moment when you're trying to explain something in the new language. You want to say a particular thing, but you don't know the exact words, so you have to work around it. You have to find another way to express the same idea using the limited vocabulary you have. This is exactly what fluent speakers do all the time. They don't know every word either. They know how to navigate around gaps, how to use what they have to get where they want to go. Every time you struggle to express an idea and find a way through, you're strengthening that navigational ability. You're teaching your brain that language is flexible, that there are multiple paths to any destination. This is the opposite of the textbook approach, which implies there's one right way to say everything. Here's something else that happens with this method. You start to develop a relationship with ambiguity. Most language learning materials try to eliminate ambiguity. Everything is clear, defined, explained, but real language is full of ambiguity. Words have multiple meanings. Context matters. Nuance exists. When you're guessing at meaning, you're sitting with ambiguity. You're developing comfort with not knowing exactly, with having a general sense rather than a precise definition. This is how native speakers experience their own language. They don't have dictionary definitions in their heads. They have fuzzy, context-dependent intuitions. A native Spanish speaker doesn't think tengo frío means I am cold. They hear tengo frío and directly feel the concept of coldness, no translation required. That directness, that immediate connection between sound and meaning, is what you're building when you work with intuition instead of memorization. The speed of this matters too. 15 minutes might seem impossibly short for meaningful language learning, but that's because most people spend those 15 minutes inefficiently. They read a page, look up 10 words, forget 9 of them, and repeat. Exhausting and futile. Instead, take one paragraph, just one, spend 15 minutes with it, but spend those minutes intensely. Read it. Guess at every unknown word and phrase. Check yourself, read it again, noticing what you missed the first time. Explain it out loud in your own words. Try to write a similar paragraph about something else. Play with the structures you found. Rearrange them. See what breaks and what works. 15 minutes of this kind of active, playful engagement builds more real language ability than an hour of passive vocabulary memorization. Why? Because you're not trying to add information to your brain. You're trying to change how your brain works. You're building new neural pathways, new ways of thinking. That happens through doing, through struggling, through playing, not through memorizing. This is also why children learn so much faster than adults. Even though adults theoretically have better study skills and more discipline, children are willing to sound stupid. They babble. They make mistakes constantly. They don't care. Adults want to be correct before they speak, so they study rules and memorize phrases, hoping to achieve correctness before attempting production. But the brain learns by doing, not by preparing to do. There's a deeper principle at work here, one that applies far beyond language learning. The brain is not a storage device. It's a pattern recognition and pattern generation system. It learns by finding regularities in experience, by building models that predict what will happen, by adjusting those models when predictions fail. Every time you encounter something that surprises you, something that doesn't fit your current model, your brain has a choice. It can dismiss the anomaly, or it can update the model. Active engagement, the kind where you make predictions and test them, forces the brain to update. Passive reception, like listening to a lecture or reading a textbook, lets the brain stay comfortable with its current model. This is why explaining things to yourself matters so much. When you try to use a pattern you think you've learned, you discover whether you actually understand it. If you can't use it, you don't really know it yet. The attempt to use it reveals the gaps, and revelation of gaps is the first step toward filling them. Now, what does this look like in practice? Imagine sitting down with a simple book in French. You've been learning French for a month using this method. You open to a new page. There's a sentence, Le chat dort sur le canapé. You know, le chat is the cat. You've seen dort before, connected to sleeping. Sur means on. Le canapé is new, but context suggests furniture. You guess, the cat sleeps on the couch. You check. Correct. But notice what else you just learned without trying. Le is used for both masculine nouns. You've now seen it with chat and canapé. The pattern strengthens. Next sentence. Il rêve de souris. Il is he or it. Rêve is new. De means of. Souris, you don't know. But you have a cat sleeping, so probably dreaming. Of what? What do cats dream of? You guess, he dreams of mice. You check. Right. And you've just learned rêve in context, connected to an image, tied to meaning, not just as a word on a vocabulary list. This is playful. This is active. This is how children learn, and it's how adults can learn if they set aside the belief that learning must be serious, structured, and systematic. The most important shift is internal. Stop trying to learn French or Spanish or Japanese. Instead, start trying to think in French, to think in Spanish, to think in Japanese. Even if you only know 20 words, use those 20 words to think. When you see a dog on the street, try to think dog in the target language. When you're hungry, think I am hungry in the target language, even if you have to look up the phrase first. This constant low-level engagement does more than any formal study session because it integrates the language into your actual thinking process. Language isn't something separate that you pull out when needed. It's the substrate of thought itself. When you use it to think, even in small ways, you're building that substrate. Here's the truth that textbooks won't tell you. You don't need to know many words to start using a language meaningfully. You need to know how to use the words you have. A child with a 300-word vocabulary can express an enormous range of ideas because they know how to play with those words, how to combine them, how to use context and gesture and tone. An adult with a 3,000-word vocabulary often can't say anything because they learned those words as isolated facts, not as tools for thinking. They know what the words mean in English, but they don't know how to use them, how they fit together, what patterns they form. This method fixes that. Every prediction you make, every guess you test, every explanation you construct, you're learning how to use the language, not just what it means. You're building the doing, not just the knowing. And here's what happens over time. The language starts to feel different. At first, every sentence is a puzzle you have to consciously solve, but gradually, some things start to feel automatic. You see a sentence structure you've encountered before, and you understand it immediately, no translation required. You want to express an idea, and a phrase appears in your mind in the target language, not English. These moments of directness, where the language connects straight to meaning without passing through translation, are small victories. Each one represents a piece of real language ability. String enough of them together, and you have fluency. The path isn't memorizing 10,000 vocabulary words and all the grammar rules. The path is using what you know, however little, to engage with the language as a living system. Make predictions, test them, speak even when you're uncertain, explain things to yourself, play with structures, notice patterns, adjust your mental model when it fails. 15 minutes a day of this kind of engagement will take you further than an hour of memorization because you're building the right thing. You're not building a database of facts about a language. You're building the ability to use language, to think in it, to let it become part of how your mind works. This is what the brain wants to do. The brain is built for language. Every healthy human brain acquires language naturally when given the right kind of exposure and interaction. The problem isn't that adult brains can't learn languages. The problem is that adults use methods that fight against how the brain naturally works. Stop fighting, start playing, make guesses, be wrong, adjust. Try again, speak badly, explain clumsily, notice patterns, use context, build intuition. The language will come, not because you memorized it, but because you lived it, even just 15 minutes at a time. That's the real trick. Not some magic technique, but simple alignment with how learning actually happens. The brain is ready. It's been ready all along. You just have to give it what it needs. Active engagement, prediction and testing, playful exploration, and permission to be wrong on the way to being right. A real one. Not a scam, not a hack, not some productivity trick that stops working after a week. A genuine shortcut that actually works, that compounds over time. That made Richard Feynman one of the most successful minds in history. Our paws lean in Feynman, and nobody warned you about it. Not your teachers, not your professors, not your mentors, not the self-help gurus. No, why? Because this shortcut looks like the opposite of success. It looks like failure. It looks like wasted time. It looks like you're going in the wrong direction. So everyone avoids it. Everyone takes the long, hard road instead. And they wonder why success is so difficult. Why they're working so hard and getting nowhere. Why other people seem to have some secret they don't know. A direct statement, well, I'm going to tell you the secret. Right now, right here. And I'm warning you, when you hear it, you're not going to believe me. You're going to think it's too simple, too obvious, too counterintuitive to actually work. But it does work. It worked for Feynman. It's worked for every genuinely successful person I've studied. And it'll work for you too. If you're willing to take it, if you're willing to look foolish for a while, if you're willing to do what everyone else refuses to do. Ready? Here it is. Apri pause for dramatic effect. The shortcut is admitting you don't know. Etcher, let that land. Watch the confusion. I told you. You don't believe me. You're thinking, that's not a shortcut. That's just being honest. That's not going to make me successful. But you're wrong. And I'm going to prove it to you. With stories, with logic, with Feynman's entire life as evidence. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand why the fastest path to mastery is admitting ignorance. Why the quickest road to expertise is confessing confusion. Why the shortcut everyone avoids is the only one that actually works. Let me show you what I mean. So tell this story with building intensity. It's 1943. Feynman is at Princeton. He's young, 25 years old, working on his PhD. And he's invited to his first major physics conference. All the big names are there, the legends, the people who write the textbooks, and there's a presentation. One of the famous physicists is explaining his latest work, complex stuff, cutting-edge research. Everyone's listening intently. Everyone's nodding along. These are the smartest people in physics, and they all seem to understand. The presentation ends. The moderator asks, "Any questions?" Silence. Nobody wants to look stupid by asking a question. Nobody wants to admit they didn't understand. These are supposed to be the experts. They're supposed to know this stuff. I pause, and then Feynman raises his hand. "I don't understand what you just said." The room freezes. Everyone turns to look at him, because Feynman just did the unthinkable. He admitted ignorance. In front of everyone, in front of the legends, in front of his peers. And you know what the presenter says? "Oh, let me explain it differently." And he does. He uses a different approach. Simpler terms, better examples. Build this and suddenly 3 other people raise their hands. "I didn't understand either." Then 5 more. Then 10. Turns out almost nobody in that room understood the presentation. They were all faking it, all pretending, all protecting their reputations. Except Feynman. They'd make the pointer. And here's what happened over the next few decades. All those people who pretended to understand, most of them faded into obscurity. They played it safe. They protected their images. And they never really learned anything. Feynman. He became one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century. Nobel Prize. Revolutionary discoveries. Legendary insights. Not because he was smarter, but because he took the shortcut. He admitted what he didn't know. And that admission gave him permission to actually learn it. Hard walk across stage. This is the shortcut nobody warned you about. And it's counterintuitive as hell. Because everything in our society teaches us the opposite. Everything tells us to fake it, to appear confident, to never admit weakness, to always look like we know what we're doing. Fake it till you make it, they say. Act like you belong. Never let them see you sweat. Project confidence even when you're unsure. Get intensus. And you know what happens when you follow that advice? You get really good at faking it. You get really good at appearing confident. You get really good at looking like you know what you're doing. But you never actually learn. You never actually improve. You never actually become competent. You're spending all your energy maintaining the appearance of knowledge instead of acquiring actual knowledge. I sure pause. That's the long road. The hard road. The road everyone's on, working hard to look successful instead of working smart to become successful. The shortcut. Admit you don't know. Stop faking. Start learning. Let me show you how powerful this is with another story. Share this example. A Feynman gets invited to join the Manhattan Project. The atomic bomb. He's one of the youngest people there, and he's surrounded by legends. Niels Bohr, Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, the people who invented quantum mechanics, the giants of physics. And in the meetings, these giants are discussing complex problems. Really complex. The kind of stuff that determines whether the bomb will work or kill everyone trying to build it. And Feynman doesn't understand something. Some calculation, some assumption, some approach. Most young physicists would stay quiet. You don't interrupt Niels Bohr. You don't question Enrico Fermi. You nod along. You pretend you get it. You figure it out later. Shears slowed down here, not Feynman. He raises his hand and he says, "I don't understand why we're doing it this way. Can someone explain?" And Bohr looks at him. And instead of being annoyed, he's delighted. Because finally, someone is asking real questions instead of pretending. Bohr starts explaining. And Feynman asks follow-up questions. And they have a real conversation. A genuine exploration of the problem. Build the payoff, and from that conversation, they discover an error in their approach. A mistake that could have been catastrophic. That nobody caught because everyone was too busy pretending to understand to actually think critically. Feynman's willingness to admit ignorance saved the project. Make the point, and here's what's crucial. Bohr specifically asked to work with Feynman after that. He wanted the young guy who asked questions, not the experienced guys who pretended to know everything. Because Bohr understood the shortcut. He understood that the person willing to admit ignorance is the person who actually learns, who actually grows, who actually becomes valuable. A direct address. I know what you're thinking. But if I admit I don't know things, people will think I'm stupid. They won't respect me. I'll lose opportunities. And I get it. That fear is real. The fear of looking incompetent. The fear of being judged. The fear of losing credibility. But here's what actually happens. Let me tell you about my own experience with this shortcut. If I get personal, I used to fake it constantly. In meetings, I'd nod along even when I was lost. In conversations, I'd use jargon to hide my confusion. When learning new things, I'd pretend I understood so I could move on quickly. And you know what? I was stuck. For years, I was working hard. I was busy. But I wasn't growing. I wasn't improving. I wasn't becoming more capable. Because I was spending all my energy maintaining the illusion of competence instead of building actual competence. Most share the turning point. Then I read about Feynman, and I decided to try the shortcut, to start admitting when I didn't understand things. And at first, it was terrifying. I'm in a meeting. Someone's explaining a strategy. I don't get it. And instead of nodding along, I say, I don't understand. Can you explain that differently? Everyone looks at me. I feel like an idiot. But then the person explains it again, more clearly, and I actually understand. And then someone else says, oh, I was confused about that too. Thanks for asking. Build this he. And over the next few months, something amazing happened. People started coming to me with questions. People started valuing my input more. People started seeing me as someone who actually understood things, not just someone who parroted what they'd heard. Why? Because I'd stopped faking. I'd stopped pretending. And because of that, when I did say I understood something, people believed me. They knew I wasn't just nodding along. They knew I'd actually figured it out. Fate pausa, that's the paradox of the shortcut. When you admit what you don't know, people trust you more about what you do know. When you fake everything, people trust you about nothing. I'll walk to other side of stage. Let me break down exactly why this shortcut works. Why admitting ignorance is actually the fastest path to success. Because it's not just about honesty. It's not just about humility. There's a deeper mechanism at play here. Fiction explained this clearly. When you admit you don't know something, three things happen. First, you stop wasting energy on pretense. All that mental effort you were using to maintain the illusion of knowledge, that gets freed up. You can use it for actual learning instead. Think about how exhausting it is to fake understanding, to keep track of what you're supposed to know, to avoid situations where your ignorance might be exposed. To maintain the facade, actus gesture, that's a massive cognitive load, and it's constant, and it prevents you from actually engaging with the material, because you're too busy managing appearances to actually learn. When you admit ignorance, that load disappears. Suddenly, all that energy is available for learning, for thinking, for understanding. Second, you get targeted help. When you admit what you don't know, people can help you with exactly what you need. But when you pretend to understand everything, people assume you're fine. They don't offer help. They don't explain further. They don't provide the resources you need. Give example. Imagine you're learning something complex, let's say coding, and you pretend you understand classes and objects and inheritance. Your teacher moves on. Your colleagues assume you've got it. Nobody offers additional explanation or resources. But you don't actually understand. So when you try to apply it, you struggle. You waste hours trying to figure it out alone. You make mistakes. You get frustrated. That contrast to now imagine you admit, I don't understand classes and objects yet. Suddenly, your teacher spends extra time explaining. Your colleagues share resources that help them. Someone offers to pair program with you. You get targeted help exactly where you need it. And you learn in hours what would have taken days to figure out alone. Third, you build real understanding instead of surface knowledge. This is the biggest one. When you pretend to understand, you move on before you're ready. You build on shaky foundations. You accumulate surface knowledge without deep understanding, and eventually it all falls apart. When you need to apply that knowledge to something new, you can't. Because you never really understood it in the first place, or make it concrete. But when you admit ignorance and stay with something until you truly understand it, you build solid foundations, real understanding, the kind that transfers, the kind that compounds, the kind that makes you genuinely capable. That's why it's a shortcut, not because it's faster in the moment, but because you only have to learn something once. You learn it properly. You don't have to come back and relearn it later when your fake understanding fails you. The people who fake it, they have to learn the same thing multiple times because they never really learned it the first time. That's the long road. The people who admit ignorance and learn properly, they learn it once and move on. That's the shortcut. Tell this story. Let me give you a Feynman example that makes this crystal clear. Feynman is teaching undergraduate physics at Caltech, and he notices something. The students can solve the problems, they can pass the tests, they can recite the equations, but they don't actually understand physics. So he does something radical. He changes how he teaches. Instead of lecturing on what they should know, he starts asking what they don't understand. Asak share this, he says to them, I'm not going to pretend you understand things you don't, and I'm not going to let you pretend either. If you don't understand something, say so, out loud, in class, in front of everyone. The students are uncomfortable at first. Nobody wants to be the one who doesn't get it. But then someone admits, I don't understand why energy is conserved. And Feynman lights up. Excellent! That's the most important question you could ask. Let's explore it, and to continue the story. And he doesn't just give them the answer. He explores it with them. He shows them how to think about it. He admits when even he doesn't fully understand aspects of it. And something magical happens. The students start actually understanding physics, not just passing tests. Understanding, because they stopped pretending. They started admitting what they didn't know. And that admission gave them permission to actually learn it. Make the points of Feynman's lectures from that period became legendary. They're still studied today. Why? Not because he made physics easier, but because he made understanding possible. By normalizing ignorance, by making it safe to admit what you don't know. By showing that admission isn't failure, it's the first step towards success. But get practical. So how do you actually use this shortcut? How do you start admitting ignorance in a way that accelerates your success instead of hurting it? Because I know there's a fear here. I know you're worried about doing this wrong, about looking stupid, about damaging your reputation. Let me give you the framework, the way to use this shortcut effectively. Let's present this clearly. First, be specific about what you don't know. Don't just say, I don't understand. That's too vague. That makes you look lazy. Instead say, I understand A and B, but I'm confused about how C connects to them. Can you clarify that connection? Erok can explain, see the difference. The second version shows you've engaged with the material. You've thought about it. You're asking a genuine, specific question. That doesn't make you look stupid. That makes you look engaged, thoughtful, serious about learning. Is there a second point? Second, ask questions that move understanding forward. Don't ask questions just to hear yourself talk. Don't ask questions you could easily Google. Ask questions that get at real understanding, that probe the logic, that test the assumptions. Why does this work? What would happen if we changed this variable? How does this connect to that other concept we discussed? Give example, Lee. These are the questions Feynman asked constantly. Not what is the answer, but why does this work? Not what should I memorize, but what's actually happening here. These questions demonstrate thought. They show you're trying to understand deeply, not just memorize superficially. Third point. Third, admit ignorance confidently. This sounds paradoxical, but it's crucial. Don't apologize for not knowing. Don't be sheepish. Don't act like ignorance is a character flaw. Say it confidently. I don't understand this yet. Help me understand it. Or explain the difference. See, I'm sorry. I'm probably just being stupid, but I don't think I get this. That's weak. That's apologizing for learning. Versus, I don't understand this yet. Let's break it down. What's actually happening here? That's confident. That's taking ownership of your learning. Make the point. Feynman never apologized for not knowing things. He was curious about them. He was interested in them. He wanted to understand them. That wasn't weakness. That was strength. And people responded to that strength. They respected it. They wanted to help him. A fourth point. Show what you've tried. When you admit you don't understand something, show that you've engaged with it, that you've thought about it, that you're not just being lazy. I've read this section 3 times and I think I understand X and Y, but Z doesn't make sense to me. Here's what I think might be happening, but I'm not sure. Can you clarify? Explain. That's not just admitting ignorance. That's showing effort. That's showing you're using ignorance as a starting point for learning, not as an excuse for not trying. And people respect that. They want to help people who are trying. They don't want to help people who want to be spoon-fed. A pause, bring it together. So that's the framework. Be specific, ask forward-moving questions, admit confidently, show your work. Do those 4 things and admitting ignorance becomes a superpower. It becomes the shortcut to success that it actually is. All right, tell one more story. Let me give you one final Feynman story that encapsulates all of this. It's late in his career. Feynman is famous, Nobel Prize winner, legendary physicist, and he's invited to give a talk at a major conference. And he starts his talk by saying, I'm going to tell you about something I don't understand. Let that land not something I've figured out. Not something I'm an expert in. Something he doesn't understand. And then he spends 45 minutes exploring this problem he can't solve, showing what he's tried, explaining where he gets stuck, admitting what confuses him. The audience is captivated because they're watching a genius think, not recite. Think, struggle, wonder. Avadara continue, and at the end, someone in the audience suggests an approach Feynman hadn't considered, and Feynman's eyes light up. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. Let me explore that. Right there, in front of everyone, he admits he hadn't thought of something. He doesn't pretend he had. He doesn't save face. He learns. And you know what everyone said afterward? That it was the best talk they'd ever seen. Not because Feynman had all the answers, but because he showed them how to think, how to question, how to learn, by admitting what he didn't know. Walk to center stage. So here's what I want you to understand. Really understand, success isn't about knowing everything. It's not about having all the answers. It's not about appearing competent. Success is about learning faster than everyone else, about understanding deeper than everyone else, about growing more than everyone else. Make the connection. And the shortcut to that, the real shortcut, the one that actually works, is admitting what you don't know. Because admission is the first step of learning. You can't learn something if you're pretending you already know it. You can't grow if you're maintaining the illusion that you don't need to. Get passionate. The people who fake it, they're stuck. They're trapped in their current level of knowledge. They're working hard to appear successful instead of working smart to become successful. The people who admit ignorance, they're free. They're learning constantly. They're growing continuously. They're actually becoming more capable every single day. Some point, that's the shortcut. That's the secret. That's what nobody warned you about. Admit you don't know, then learn it properly, deeply, once. That's faster than pretending you know and never really learning it. That's faster than fake understanding that collapses under pressure. That's faster than surface knowledge that doesn't transfer. Final challenges. So here's what I want you to do, starting today. Right now, find one thing you've been pretending to understand. One concept, one skill, one area of knowledge where you've been nodding along but secretly confused. And admit it to yourself first, then to someone who can help you learn it. Pauses, say it out loud. I don't actually understand this. I've been pretending. Can you help me really learn it? And then actually learn it. Don't just get a surface explanation and move on. Stay with it until you truly understand, until you could explain it to someone else, until you've built real knowledge. Build to conclusion and do that once. Just once. And notice how different it feels. How much faster you learn when you're not maintaining the illusion of knowledge. How much more confident you feel when your understanding is real instead of fake. And then do it again and again. Make it a habit. Make it your default. Stop faking. Start admitting. Slow down. That's what Feynman did. Every single day of his life, he admitted what he didn't know. He asked the questions everyone else was afraid to ask. He learned what everyone else pretended to already understand. And that made all the difference. Not talent, not intelligence, not luck. The willingness to admit ignorance. To look foolish temporarily so he could become wise permanently. To take the shortcut everyone else avoided because they were too proud or too scared. Final statement. You can take that shortcut too. You can stop faking. You can start learning. You can grow faster than you ever thought possible. But only if you're willing to do what Feynman did. What all genuinely successful people do. Admit you don't know. That's the shortcut. That's the secret. That's what nobody warned you about. Pause it now. You know the question is, will you use it? Thank you. And if you want more insights into how Feynman actually thought and worked, if you want more shortcuts, more techniques, more secrets that genuinely accelerate success, Do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're uncovering the real methods behind one of history's greatest minds with practical applications you can use immediately. Join us. Let's take the shortcuts that actually work. See you in the next one. The human mind has a peculiar feature that almost everyone overlooks. When you sit down to study something difficult, a chapter of physics, a mathematical proof, a complex idea, your brain operates in one of two fundamentally different modes. The mode you're in determines whether you truly understand or merely memorize. And here's what matters. You can switch between these modes deliberately in about 60 seconds. Let's start with something you probably recognize. You're reading a textbook, following along, nodding at each sentence. Everything seems to make sense as your eyes move across the page. You reach the end of the chapter, close the book, and suddenly realize you can't explain what you just read. The words went in, but nothing stuck. This happens to students everywhere, every day, and they blame themselves. I'm not smart enough. I don't have a mind for this subject. Some people just get it, and I don't. But this has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with which mode your brain was operating in. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Your brain can either receive information passively, or it can actively wrestle with it. When you read that textbook and things seem clear, you're in receiving mode. Information flows past your eyes, registers as familiar patterns, creates a temporary sense of understanding. This mode feels comfortable, even pleasant. No strain, no confusion, everything smooth. But this smoothness is deceptive. You're not building real understanding, you're building an illusion of understanding. The second mode, the active mode, feels completely different. It's uncomfortable. When you engage this mode, you stop following along and start questioning. You pause after a sentence and ask yourself, can you explain this concept without looking at the page? Could you teach this to someone else? What would happen if you changed one variable in this equation? Why does this principle work this way and not another? This mode creates mental friction. Your brain has to work. And that work, that strain you feel, that's exactly what builds genuine understanding. The remarkable thing is this. Most people never deliberately choose which mode they're in. They default to passive receiving because it's easier, because it feels like progress, because turning pages and highlighting sentences creates a satisfying sense of productivity. Then they wonder why nothing stays with them, why they can't apply what they've learned, why exam day brings panic instead of confidence. So here's the 60-second switch that activates the deeper mode. Close whatever you're studying. Look away from the page. Now, explain out loud what you just read, not in the book's words, but in your own language. Pretend you're teaching it to someone who knows nothing about the subject. Speak it aloud, actual words in actual sentences, not vague thoughts in your head. Within seconds, something happens. You discover gaps. Concepts that seemed crystal clear a moment ago now feel fuzzy. Connections you thought you understood fall apart when you try to articulate them. Words fail you. You stumble. You realize you can't actually explain this thing you thought you knew. This moment of confusion, this is not failure. This is the activation point. This is where real learning begins. The brain has a peculiar characteristic. It cannot distinguish between familiarity and understanding. When you read something, your brain recognizes patterns, connects to existing knowledge, and signals, yes, this makes sense. But recognition isn't the same as comprehension. Think about how you can recognize a friend's face instantly without being able to describe or draw it accurately. Recognition is automatic, surface level. Understanding requires something deeper. When you force yourself to explain something without the source material in front of you, you move from recognition to reconstruction. Your brain must retrieve the concept, organize it into coherent structure, translate it into language, and present it logically. Every gap in your understanding becomes immediately obvious. You can't fake it. You can't gloss over the parts you don't quite grasp. The explanation either works or it doesn't. This process does something fascinating. It exposes the difference between what you think you know and what you actually know. And that difference is where growth happens. Every gap you discover is a precise target for further study. Instead of rereading entire chapters, hoping something will stick better the second time, you now know exactly which specific concepts need more attention. But here's where it gets more interesting. The act of attempting to explain something, even when you struggle, even when you fail, strengthens your understanding far more than passive review ever could. The brain remembers what it works to retrieve. When you force yourself to reconstruct an idea from memory, you're not just testing your knowledge, you're actively reinforcing the neural pathways that encode that knowledge. Think about what happens physically when you try to recall something. Your brain searches through its networks, making connections, activating related concepts, constructing bridges between ideas. Every failed attempt, every moment of struggle, every wait, how does this work again, strengthens those pathways. The difficulty isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. The harder your brain works to retrieve and reconstruct information, the more permanently that information embeds itself. This explains something that puzzles many students. Why cramming the night before an exam produces such fragile knowledge. When you frantically review material hours before a test, everything feels familiar. You recognize concepts, nod along, tell yourself, yes, I know this. But you haven't forced your brain to actively retrieve and reconstruct anything. You've created recognition without understanding. The moment the exam presents that knowledge in a slightly different context or asks you to apply it in an unexpected way, the whole structure collapses. You knew it last night. Why can't you remember it now? Because you never actually knew it. You recognized it. Contrast this with someone who regularly practices active recall. They close the book and explain concepts aloud. They struggle, discover gaps, go back and study those specific points, then try explaining again. They repeat this cycle. By exam day, they've reconstructed those ideas dozens of times. The knowledge isn't sitting on the surface as fragile recognition. It's embedded deep as robust understanding. When the exam throws unexpected questions, their brain has practiced manipulating these concepts in multiple ways. They can adapt, apply, extend what they know. Now, let's go deeper into the mechanism. Why does speaking the explanation out loud matter so much? Why not just think through it silently? The answer lies in how language forces precision. When you explain something in your head, your thoughts can remain vague and impressionistic. You can wave your mental hand at fuzzy concepts and tell yourself, yeah, basically that, without really articulating anything concrete. But when you speak aloud, you must form complete sentences. You must choose specific words. You must organize ideas into sequential order. This requirement for precision exposes every crack in your understanding. Try this experiment. Take something you think you understand well, a process you perform regularly, a principle from your field, a skill you're confident in. Now explain it aloud as if teaching a complete beginner. Don't just describe what to do. Explain why it works this way. Explain what would happen if you changed one step. Explain the underlying principle. You'll likely find yourself saying, more than you expected. Pausing to find the right words. Backtracking because your first explanation wasn't quite right. Realizing you're using jargon without explaining what it means. Discovering that your understanding was actually a collection of memorized procedures without deep comprehension of the principles underneath. This is valuable information. These struggles show you exactly where your understanding is superficial, and now you know precisely what to investigate further. Here's another layer. Explaining aloud also reveals logical gaps and contradictions that silent review misses. When you read a textbook, your brain automatically fills in missing steps. It papers over logical leaps. It connects dots that aren't actually connected on the page, drawing from your existing knowledge to make things seem more coherent than they are. But when you speak an explanation, you must make every step explicit. If there's a logical gap, you stumble over it. If two ideas contradict each other, the contradiction becomes obvious when you try to state both clearly. This is why the best students don't just study, they teach. Even if they're teaching an imaginary audience, even if they're explaining to an empty room, the act of teaching forces a level of understanding that passive study never reaches. Teachers know this phenomenon well. You never truly master a subject until you've taught it. Not because teaching adds new information, but but because teaching demands that you reconstruct the entire logical structure from foundations to conclusions, exposing every weak spot in your grasp. Let's talk about application, because understanding the principle isn't enough. You need to see how to use it practically. Suppose you're studying thermodynamics. You've just read a section about entropy. It made sense while reading. Now close the book. Explain entropy to an imaginary student who's never heard the term. Use simple language. Give examples. Explain why it matters. If you're like most people on their first attempt, you'll stammer something about disorder and energy spreading out, and then peter out. You might remember the formal definition you read 10 minutes ago, but can you explain what it actually means? Can you give a concrete example? Can you say why this concept is important enough to have its own word? Go back to the book. Find exactly what you couldn't explain. Read that section again, but this time actively. Ask questions as you read. When it says entropy increases, ask yourself, increases compared to what? What exactly is measuring this increase? Why does it always increase what would happen if it decreased? What prevents it from decreasing? Now close the book again. Explain again. You'll do better this time, but you'll still find gaps. Good. Those gaps are your curriculum. They tell you precisely where to focus. Repeat this cycle. Each time through, your explanation gets clearer, more precise, more comprehensive. You're not just memorizing the textbook's words, you're building your own understanding from the ground up. By the 10th iteration, you can explain entropy clearly, give multiple examples, answer questions about edge cases, and connect it to other thermodynamic principles. This is real mastery, not the illusion of understanding that comes from nodding along while reading. Or consider mathematics. You've worked through a proof, following each step. It all checks out. Now, close your notebook. Reproduce the proof from memory, not the mechanical steps, the logical flow. Why does this step follow from the previous one? What makes this approach work? What would happen if you tried a different method? You'll quickly discover which parts you genuinely understood versus which parts you simply accepted because they were written in front of you. Maybe you followed the algebraic manipulations but don't really grasp why this particular technique was chosen. Maybe you understood each individual step but can't see the overall strategy. These revelations are gold. They transform vague, "I should probably review this," into specific, "I need to understand why we factor this expression here." The same principle applies to any field. Reading history, close the book and explain the causes of a war without looking at the text. Studying biology, describe how photosynthesis works as if teaching a classroom. Learning a language, explain a grammatical rule in your own words. Every field, every subject, every concept can be approached this way. Here's what happens when you make this your standard practice. Studying becomes efficient. Instead of spending hours rereading textbooks, hoping something will stick, you spend minutes identifying exactly what needs more work. Instead of generic anxiety about not getting it, you develop a precise map of your knowledge gaps. Instead of passive consumption that creates illusory progress, you engage in active construction that builds real understanding. And there's something deeper happening too. This practice develops a particular relationship with knowledge. You stop seeing learning as absorption information flowing from books into your brain and start seeing it as construction. You're not a vessel being filled. You're a builder assembling understanding piece by piece, testing each connection, ensuring everything fits together properly. This shift in perspective changes everything. When something doesn't make sense, you don't blame yourself for being stupid. You recognize it as a signal. There's a piece missing from your construction, a connection that needs strengthening, a principle that requires deeper investigation. Confusion becomes useful feedback rather than a source of frustration. You also develop what might be called intellectual honesty. You can no longer fool yourself about what you know. The moment you try to explain something and stumble, you face the truth. You don't actually understand this yet. This can be uncomfortable at first. It's easier to maintain the pleasant illusion that reading equals knowing. But this honesty is liberating. You stop wasting time on material you've already mastered. You stop feeling guilty about things you haven't mastered because you know exactly what needs work and you're working on it systematically. There's practical wisdom here that extends beyond academic subjects. This same principle applies to any skill, any knowledge, any understanding you want to develop. Want to truly understand how your car engine works? Read about it, then explain it aloud without notes. Want to master a recipe? Cook it once following instructions, then explain the process and the principles behind each step without looking at the recipe. Want to understand a political position you disagree with? Study it, then explain the reasoning behind it as persuasively as possible without referring to your sources. The method is universal because it's based on how the brain actually works, not on tricks or shortcuts. You're not hacking your mind, you're using it properly. You're engaging the mechanism that evolution designed for deep learning, active retrieval and reconstruction. And here's the beautiful part. This 60-second practice closing the material and explaining aloud costs you almost nothing in time but multiplies the value of every minute you spend studying. 1 hour of active recall beats 5 hours of passive rereading. You learn more, retain longer, understand deeper, all while spending less total time studying. The brain is not a tape recorder that stores information exactly as received. It's a dynamic system that strengthens whatever it actively uses. Every time you force your brain to retrieve and reconstruct knowledge, you're telling it, this matters, keep this accessible, maintain these pathways. Every time you passively reread without testing yourself, you're telling your brain, this is just noise, no need to prioritize it. So the question isn't whether you have time to practice active recall. The question is whether you can afford not to. Every hour spent in passive study mode is an hour that produces minimal lasting value. Every minute spent in active retrieval mode is a minute that produces exponential returns. The path forward is simple. The next time you sit down to study anything, a chapter, an article, a set of notes, make this commitment. After every page, every section, every concept, close the material and explain it aloud. Struggle through the gaps. Identify what's missing. Go back and focus on exactly those gaps. Repeat, do this consistently, and something remarkable happens. Your relationship with learning transforms. Understanding becomes tangible rather than mysterious. Progress becomes measurable rather than vague. Confidence replaces anxiety because you know exactly what you know and what you don't. The brain wants to understand deeply. It's built for it. But it needs you to engage the right mode, the active, wrestling, reconstructing mode. That mode is always available, always just 60 seconds away. Close the book, speak the idea. Face the gaps honestly, fill them precisely. This is how genuine understanding is built, piece by piece, concept by concept, explanation by explanation.
Your mind is the most powerful tool in the universe. With it, you can completely transform your reality. Everything you're living today is the result of thoughts that were planted yesterday, and everything you will achieve tomorrow depends on what you choose to think right now. Pay very close attention to me in this moment because I'm about to reveal something extraordinary. There is a single habit that can train your mind to create the life you want. A habit so powerful it turns failures into opportunities, ideas into businesses, and knowledge into wealth. This habit is the secret to learning anything quickly, and more importantly, using that knowledge to build freedom and prosperity. The world is full of intelligent people, but very few know how to turn intelligence into results. What separates those who move forward from those who stay behind is exactly this habit: the refusal to live with shallow knowledge. Those who master this process create wealth because they see what others can't. They find solutions where others only see obstacles. They create opportunities where most people only see problems. Now think about this. How many times have you convinced yourself that you weren't good at something, when in truth you had simply never applied this habit? The truth is your mind has no limits except the ones you accept. And when you decide to cultivate absolute clarity about every idea you touch, you unlock a creative force that can completely change the course of your life. This is the turning point. A mind trained with this habit stops being a warehouse of random information and becomes a factory of wealth and innovation. Now listen closely, because here is the key. Stop lying to yourself. The only thing standing between you and the life you dream of is not the government, not the economy, not luck. It's your mind. If you don't master your mind, forget wealth, forget success, forget freedom, because everything starts inside. There is one habit powerful enough to transform your life in a brutal way. Training your mind every single day until you completely master it. That means no longer being a slave to your emotions, no longer hiding behind excuses, and finally facing your mistakes head on. Ordinary people run away from pain. Extraordinary people use pain as fuel to grow. Every time you feel weak, lazy, anxious, or afraid, that is the moment to train. That is the moment to strengthen the most powerful muscle in the universe, your mind. Training the body gives you strength. Training the mind gives you power. And mental power is worth more than any bank account, because a trained mind creates wealth, creates solutions, creates paths where before there were only walls. Ask yourself every single day, where am I failing? Don't hide behind justifications. Don't throw responsibility onto others. Have the courage to look your mistakes in the eye and ask, how can I improve right now? That question, repeated daily, is what separates the mediocre from the unstoppable. The truth is harsh. As long as you keep letting your emotions control you, you will keep living small. But the moment you decide to train your mind like a warrior sharpens his sword, everything changes. Your mind stops being the enemy and becomes the most lethal weapon you possess. Training the mind means cutting the excess, eliminating weak thoughts, silencing doubt, replacing emotion with strategy. You don't need cheap motivation. You need brutal clarity. The habit is simple. Look at yourself without filters, and don't turn away from the answer. Those who run from this question are condemned to mediocrity. Those who face it every day grow. Is it uncomfortable? Yes, but it's discomfort that shapes giants. Pay very close attention to me right now. Mastering the mind means stepping into a battlefield every single day. It is war. You have to wake up each morning determined not to be a prisoner of your own thoughts. An undisciplined mind invents excuses, creates fears, fabricates limits that don't exist. It whispers, I can't, not today, maybe tomorrow. And you believe it. You live trapped by a weak voice that sabotages you. That ends today. From this day forward, face the raw truth and accept reality exactly as it is. When anger comes, channel it into production. When fear knocks at your door, face it like a soldier defending his country. Your mind is your most precious asset, more valuable than gold. Everything that exists in your life began first as a thought. Every victory, every defeat, every opportunity taken or wasted was born inside your head. And now you need to understand something. Failure is inevitable. Procrastination at some point is inevitable too. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The problem is not failing. The problem is refusing to learn from failure. The problem is not procrastinating one day. The problem is turning procrastination into a lifestyle. Accept that you will stumble, but decide that every stumble will become a lesson. And here is one of the most powerful tools to master the mind. Write. Write down your thoughts, your goals, your mistakes, your progress. The mind is messy when it only lives inside your head, but the moment you put it on paper, you create clarity. What was chaos becomes direction. What was a storm becomes a plan. Procrastination is often tied to stress and anxiety. You delay because your mind is overloaded, because there is a fear of not being perfect, because there is an inner pressure that paralyzes you. Recognize this. And when procrastination shows up, don't blame yourself. Observe it. Ask, what is stressing me right? What can I simplify? Many times the key is breaking the task into smaller steps and starting with the simplest one. Mastering the mind also means respecting your limits. You don't have to do everything at once. You just need to give your best today. The maximum clarity, the maximum effort, the maximum discipline that is within your reach right now. Tomorrow, you do it again. And with time, this consistency builds mental strength, builds character, builds results. So remember this: the mind is not mastered through perfection. It is mastered through training. It is mastered through repetition. It is mastered through the courage to look within and the discipline to correct what needs to be corrected. Accept that you are human, but never accept being a prisoner of your own mind. You must train your mind every single day, the same way you train a muscle. Train it so you don't get lost in uncontrolled emotions. Train it so you don't believe weak thoughts. Train it to turn fear into action, anxiety into focus, and anger into productive energy. Write. Put your goals, your failures, your victories on paper, because the mind deceives, but paper shows the truth. Clarity is born the moment you face your thoughts outside your head. Every line you write is a piece of chaos you organize. And when procrastination shows up, because it will, remember this: many times it's only a signal of stress, of overload, of fear of not being perfect. Breathe, simplify, break the task into smaller steps, and start with the very first one. Movement destroys inertia. Mastering the mind is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's about giving your very best today, even if it's little, and then repeating tomorrow and the next day until you become impossible to break. It's about building discipline when no one is watching. It's about facing discomfort on purpose, because you know that's where true strength is born. This is the habit, the daily practice of shaping your mind until it becomes your greatest ally. Because in the end, it's not the world that decides who you will be. It's the mind you choose to train every single day. Now that you've understood the power of this habit, I want you to do something simple but transformative. Write in the comments the phrase, "I master my mind." That will be your first step toward mastering your mind for success. Write it as a decree, a commitment to your own greatness. Because when you declare it, you reinforce inside yourself the identity of someone who has already chosen to win. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more transformative videos inspired by the world's greatest thinkers. Every day, new ideas, new lessons, and new tools to help you build your best self. Action cures fear. If you wait to feel like it before you act, you're only strengthening procrastination. And the difference between those who achieve and those who stay stuck in the same place is this: acting at the exact moment the mind tries to delay. Now pay very close attention, because I'm about to reveal something few people ever tell you about procrastination. You may never have realized this. Procrastination isn't rest. It's the hidden source of your stress. You think you're easing the pressure when you postpone a task, but the opposite happens. Every minute that passes without doing what needs to be done, your mind keeps working in silence, like an alarm that never shuts off. That's why even without taking action, you feel drained, heavy, and anxious. The body rests, but the mind doesn't. And let me tell you something most people don't know. Putting off work, delaying a commitment, is actually more exhausting than doing it, because the weight of postponing is heavier than the effort of completing. When you decide to delay, your mind doesn't forget. It keeps reminding you over and over. When you try to relax, the thought pops up. When you try to sleep, your brain whispers, "You still haven't done it." It's like carrying a debt that never stops charging interest. But when you finally face the task and get it done, something powerful happens inside you. The weight lifts, your body relaxes, and your mind finds peace. It's as if the energy once drained by guilt is suddenly freed up to create, to dream, and to achieve more. Great achievers understood this in practice. Acting is easier than delaying. That's the real secret. The effort of doing is limited, but the reward is incredible. The effort of carrying the mental weight of not doing is endless.
And here lies the first key. Every time you catch yourself stalling, remember, you're choosing the harder path. It looks like comfort, but it's suffering in disguise. True freedom begins when you choose to act. Not because you're inspired, but because you've understood that action is the only way to reclaim the energy procrastination steals from you. So now the question is, are you going to keep hiding behind excuses? Or are you going to use this moment to flip the switch once and for all? If you're willing, stay with me until the end of this talk. I ask you for just 10 minutes. 10 minutes that could unlock your life and free you from the weight of procrastination forever. Believe me, very few lessons like the one you'll hear today are ever shared. Pay close attention now, because what I'm about to reveal is the first weapon to crush procrastination once and for all. Here's one of the secrets. Start before you're ready. The biggest mistake people make is believing they must wait for the perfect moment, the perfect motivation, the perfect energy to act. But that moment never comes. And the longer you wait, the further action slips away. The secret is to flip the logic. It's not motivation that creates action. It's action that creates motivation. And here's something that may change the way you think about action. A person with little knowledge, but who decides to take a step forward, is already miles ahead of someone with all the knowledge in the world who refuses to move. Those who know little but take action achieve more than those who know much yet remain still. Because it's not the size of what you know that defines your future. It's the size of the step you take. Stagnant knowledge is like still water. It evaporates with time. But action, even when imperfect, is like a flowing river. It carves a path, learns along the way, and grows stronger with every mile it moves forward. So here's an exercise that can transform your life. Whenever you feel that urge to delay, commit to just 2 minutes of the task. Just 2 minutes. Pick up the notebook and write the first line. Open your computer and organize the first file. It doesn't matter what the task is. Break the resistance with the smallest possible action. And something almost magical happens. Once you begin, even for 2 minutes, the energy shifts. The mind that resisted starts to cooperate. The body that felt heavy finds rhythm. And here is the second key. The power of simply beginning, even without knowing everything. Great achievers aren't different from you. They only learned this one secret. Never wait to be ready. That's the greatest secret. They understand that perfection comes along the way, not at the beginning. And if you apply this, you'll realize that the act of starting is already half the victory. So, when procrastination tries to trap you again, remember, don't fight it by waiting for strength. Beat it by taking a step. Start small, but start now. Pay close attention now. Destroying procrastination is not a single act. It's a way of life. It's no use starting today only to fall into the same traps tomorrow. You need to build within yourself a system so simple and so strong that procrastination finds no space to grow. The secret is in turning small victories into daily discipline. Every time you act, no matter how small the action, you're training your mind to obey action instead of doubt. You begin to create a pattern. That pattern becomes character, and character shapes destiny. This is how great minds, scientists, inventors, and achievers went so far, not because they were perfect, but because they chose to act every single day. Procrastination isn't only about what you fail to do, but about the pattern you reinforce each day. Every time you delay, you're training your brain to delay again. But every time you act, even in something small, you're training your mind to act again. This is how habits are born, through small, invisible repetitions that, when added together, create an unbreakable force. Imagine this: a person who writes just 1 page a day. It seems small, almost nothing, but in a year they have 365 pages, a full book. Meanwhile, someone with big ideas plans to write 365 pages in a single week, but without discipline ends the year with nothing but blank pages. And here's the key: it is always habit that wins over talent. You don't need to change your entire life today. You only need to start small, but repeat it every single day.
Read for 5 minutes. Exercise for 5 minutes. What matters is not the size of the step, but the consistency with which you take it. So engrave this in your mind. Don't wait for perfect conditions, and whenever you begin small. Because today's discipline, no matter how small it seems, will become tomorrow's enormous legacy. Now pay very close attention, because we've reached the most important part. It's not enough to just start building good habits if you keep feeding the bad ones. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. No matter how much water you pour in, it all drains out through the holes. Procrastination, addictions, constant distractions. These are the holes that drain your energy, your discipline, and your life. Have you ever wondered why everything that feels like sin also feels so good? It's because almost everything that feels good pulls you into the pit. Everything that gives you immediate pleasure without discipline comes with a heavy price. The world offers sweet shortcuts that in the end lead straight into a hole. Overeating, drinking without control, the comfort of laziness, endless distractions. All of these seem to ease the moment, but they are quietly stealing your life. The drink that corrodes your health, the screen that robs your days. Immediate pleasure almost always hides a long-term prison. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. If something gives you pleasure but weakens you, it isn't pleasure, it's poison. It's like a fire that warms you for an instant but then burns everything around you. The problem isn't pleasure itself, but being enslaved to it. When you live chasing what feels good and easy, you lose the strength to build what is great and lasting. Addictions always sell the illusion of freedom, but they always deliver chains. You think you're choosing, but in reality you're being chosen, dominated, controlled. And there's only one way to break free. Decide that no momentary pleasure will ever be greater than the extraordinary life you were meant to live. Discipline may taste bitter at first, but it's discipline that brings true pleasure. The pleasure of achieving, of feeling proud, of looking in the mirror and seeing someone free. Because the pleasure of sin lasts for a moment, but its weight can last for years. So next time temptation comes, remember, what feels good now may be the very thing digging your grave. But if you have the courage to say no to the immediate, you are saying yes to the future you've always dreamed of. And here's the key. The human brain is always searching for reward. If you only feed it cheap, easy rewards, it gets used to crumbs. But if you train your mind to wait for and pursue greater rewards, you teach your soul to choose greatness over mediocrity. Trading immediate pleasure for the satisfaction of achievement is an act of maturity. It's deciding that your life is worth more than a few seconds of relief. It's understanding that true pleasure isn't found in what you consume, but in what you build. And here's the decision you need to make. The next time temptation comes, ask yourself, do I want 5 minutes of pleasure or a lifetime of pride? The answer to that question defines your destiny. So start before you're ready.
Take the first step, even if it's small. Replace immediate pleasure with the satisfaction of achievement. Feed good habits every day and cut out the ones that drag you down. And now the greatest secret of all. Without it, nothing is possible. Understand that you will make mistakes. You will fall, you will fail, you will procrastinate at times, and that's okay. To err is human. What separates failures from the successful is not the absence of mistakes, but the ability to rise and keep going.
Persistence through habit. True power doesn't come from always getting it right, but from getting it wrong less and less. Success is born out of disciplined repetition, not perfection. The great achievers all made mistakes, stumbled, failed, but they never stopped. And that is exactly what you must do. Fall, learn, and continue. Because the only true defeat is giving up. So take this as a life decree. It's not about never failing. It's about never stopping. Those who persist win. Those who insist win. And those who decide to continue, even after the fall, find in habit the key to ending procrastination. And now I want you to do something simple yet powerful. Declare your decision for change. Comment below, "I decide to overcome procrastination." Let this sentence be your mark that from today on, you are no longer a prisoner of inertia. And don't forget to leave a like if this video has helped you. It's very important for us. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.